said, what is the L in SEL? And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our behavioral health team.
Thank you, Dr. Ryder. If Justin, I could ask for you to put up the first Zoom poll questions. And if everyone would just take a second, we do want to delve into the L in the social emotional learning. If you could pick a response on the poll. And Justin, if you could let me know when those results come in and share them with the audience.
Will do. Okay, looks like we're complete.
Thank you very much. So when I look at the poll, I see that we have the majority of people who have said all of the items above. And then we have a secondary group that talk about the skills learned in school. The good news is that the L in social emotional learning is the learning that involves all these environments. So everyone is correct. There are skills that we teach children in school, skills at home. There are skills that are observed, and for some people, they readily are able to observe relationship skills, and they sort of are naturals at absorbing that into their learning process. Community is also a good source of instruction on the learning of social emotional learning. As we talk about in many things, it takes a village. So thank you for the audience in responding to that. And I think we'll go to the next slide, Justin. We have a little bit of an idea of what social emotional learning is. A lot of you had a very good foundation in it, but we may have some people here who this is their first time in sort of venturing in this area, whether it be from the pandemic. There are some concerns that you have for how your children are socially and emotionally navigating the new normal per se. And some people who have been in workshops and had instruction in social emotional learning. So we want to give everyone a common background that social emotional learning is a part of education, a part of human development. It's part of what being a human is. It's a process which, through all people, young and old, acquire knowledge, skills, and attitudes about developing their identity, managing emotions, achieving personal and collective goals, feeling and showing empathy, establish and maintaining supportive relationships, and making responsible and caring decisions. It's a lot of things. And it's not a set amount of skill sets. They are skills, but they're ever evolving. So a young child may be at a certain level in their development and understanding of social emotional learning, and those skills are built upon in middle school and built and refined upon in high school and then through life. If you think about, there's the whole internet has introduced a very different volley of social and emotional learning. How do you respond in a social internet situation? And then for all of us, young and old, the whole world of Zoom has introduced other social and emotional learning. What's the etiquette on Zoom? How do you dress on Zoom? No, Johnny, you may not sit on your bed during a Zoom classroom meeting. We want you to be sitting up. So there's many things that we learn throughout our life, and we evolve and change as we learn what the social and emotional learning aspects are of the environment we're in. Next slide, please. And Dr. Farina is going to talk a little bit more about what are the essence, what's the competencies involved in social emotional learning.
All right. Thanks, Maureen. So when we look at social emotional learning, as Maureen mentioned, we're talking about skill sets that can be learned and taught. And some of the areas or skills that we're looking at as far as social emotional learning come from the CASEL organization. The CASEL organization is a collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning. It was founded in 1994 and developed an integrated framework for how educators, families, and communities can partner together to support social emotional learning. The early SEL pioneers found that students whose schools taught social and emotional skills don't just earn higher grades and better test scores, but also have students who have higher self-esteem, lower rates of mental illness or chronic stress, and better attitudes about their teachers and classmates. This is why this area is so important for us to develop in our students. The 5 areas, the 5 core competencies that the CASEL addresses are 5 broad and interrelated areas, including self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So I'd like to kind of further go into each of these 5 core areas. Next slide. Next slide. Justin. So self-awareness, the ability to accurately recognize one's emotions and thoughts and their influence on behavior. This includes accurately assessing strengths and limitations and possessing a well-grounded sense of competence and optimism. It includes the ability to identify strengths and weaknesses with a balance of accuracy and positivity, with the goal of creating what's called a growth mindset, or a belief that one's capable enough to reach their aspirations despite setbacks or weaknesses. It combines self-analysis with confidence and optimism. All these skill sets that we're going to talk about today are really begun in early childhood development and grow throughout one's life. So in the area of self-awareness, we're talking about sub-skills that could include identifying emotions, accurate self-perception, self-confidence, recognizing strengths, and self-efficacy, or the belief that you can succeed in a particular situation. That's self-awareness. Next slide. This is just kind of, I think we can all relate to when our kids are young and still growing in their self-management skills and self-regulatory skills. So the next one is self-management. Self-management is really the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations. It's really putting self-awareness into action. And it includes managing stress, controlling impulses, motivating yourself, setting and working towards achieving personal and academic goals. Self-management helps individuals develop willpower and organizational ability and daily habits that they're going to need to meet their goals and aspirations. These skills, these sub-skills are really a gift that keeps on going throughout a student's academic career and beyond. Some say that self-management or regulation skills, really the heart of executive functioning ability, are the skill sets that students may use their intellectual ability and academic skills to get in college, but self-management, self-regulation, executive skills are what get kids out of college. Next slide. Social awareness is the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and to understand social and ethical norms for behavior, to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. Social awareness also involves becoming aware and respectful towards diverse backgrounds And it also improves cooperation, particularly in like tense situations that we all will come across in our lifetime. These sub-skills include empathy, perspective taking, respect for others, and diversity awareness. Next slide. I thought this was so true. And again, all these skills, we're all on the spectrum of the development of these skills. And even as we are adults, we're still developing abilities in these areas. Relationship skills are the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. This includes communicating clearly, listening actively, cooperating, resisting inappropriate social pressure, negotiating conflict constructively, and seeking and offering help when needed. Oh, let me go back for a sec to relationship skills. We know research shows that individuals with close relationships experience significantly less stress than those who feel isolated. The sub-skills in relationship skills include verbal and nonverbal communication, teamwork, social engagement, relationship building. And the next slide. Responsible decision-making, or the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on consideration of ethical standards, safety concerns, social norms, the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions, and the well-being of self and others. This becomes particularly important as students get older and their options or the challenges that they face or the opportunities they face where they have to make, they have opportunities to make more decisions on their own. These sub-skills would include analyzing situations, evaluating possible outcomes, identifying social problems, personal reflection, and ethical responsibility. I'll hand this over to Kara now.
Hi. So after hearing what social and emotional learning means and the skills and competencies that it encompasses, you might wonder, why does SEL matter to us? Why is there such a big global push to teach children these skills? I think we can all agree that these are important skills, and we want our children to develop these skills. We feel like if they can understand themselves better, get along with others, they're most likely going to lead happier lives. But it goes much deeper than that. There's actually research to show that when students are exposed to programs that focus on these skills, there are real benefits in so many areas. One very important area related to education is the benefit of attention and learning. So students who feel safe and who feel supported emotionally actually do better in school. They're able to focus better and they learn better. So you can see on the slide some of the other benefits from SEL and improved decision-making, relationship quality, improved physical and mental health, performance and creativity, decreased student anxiety, behavior problems, substance use, and then long-term improvements in student skills, attitudes, and academic performance. So these are things that research has actually supported, and we actually have a short 2-minute video from Castle that addresses some of these ideas that we're going to show to you now.
Social emotional learning is essential.
It's the tools that kids need to be resilient, to be problem solvers, to be good people.
SEL is really about the holistic development of young people.
SEL is trying to bring a balance to the individual and what are the personal competencies you need to develop to be successful. How do you pull them all together so that kids can relate and navigate the world more effectively?
The myth was that knowledge was information that could be bolted onto a brain like any other kind of mechanical part. The truth is knowledge is constructive. The truth is all learning is relational. The truth is that emotion drives attention and attention drives learning.
Social and emotional learning is about how you do school. It's about what the student experiences, what the student learns, how teachers teach.
We can think about schools and classrooms, out-of-school time spaces, families, etc., as places where there's an exchange of knowledge about the world, knowledge about yourself, and knowledge about the other persons that you're interacting with. All of those kinds of experiences, I think, help form and expose and shape the ways in which young people understand themselves and other people.
And we start talking about the whole child. Does your child understand self-awareness? Do they understand social awareness? Do they make good decisions? Are they responsible? And then we start talking about what that applies to academics and looking at all the essential skills we need them to be successful in life.
Children learn when their heart is open, engaged, connected, and filled with purpose.
Learning is magical, and through SEL, we can create conditions that allow all kids to access that magic.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina for the next slide.
Hi. So when our students are, the next slide, Justin. When our students are, thank you, struggling with social emotional learning, how do we support them in schools? And what we use is what we call the tier system to help to support kids. This right here, you'll see the triangle. It's a visual representation of a tier system. We use that to figure out the best ways to support kids. You'll see at the bottom is tier 1. That's because tier 1, the purpose of tier 1 is to support all students. And we're going to be going into tier 1 in this presentation. So I'm going to kind of scoot right up to tier 2, which is in the middle of the triangle. Tier 2 is for students that are needing more support than tier 1. So it really can be for anything, academics, that social, emotional, behavioral, whatever that may be. We're talking here about social emotional, so I'll reference that, but it can be for any areas in the educational world. Tier 2 can consist of a lot of different types of interventions, but typically consists of short-term interventions, which could look like many different things, but just some examples are brief sessions with social worker, counselor, social skills group. I got some music to back up my presentation. I don't see the triangle,
Give me
but
1
I will
second.
keep. Oh, okay. I think Justin was trying to make it a little more exciting with some dance music. Got it. All good. Now the tiers, and just so the tier 2 and tier 1, and you'll see that with tier 1 as we go through the presentation. But tier 2, just as tier 1, may look different depending upon elementary, middle, or high school. That's just because kids at different developmental levels might need different interventions. When you go all the way up to tier 3, which is the smallest portion of the triangle, the top of the triangle, what we're looking at that point are students, kids that are not succeeding with their core social emotional learning or any of the short-term interventions through tier 2. So we move them up to tier 3. It is the most intense level of support. Again, that can look different ways, but one example could be a psychoeducational evaluation where we're determining if there's a disability or a disabling condition where the student may need more intensive type of support. Now you'll see the arrows on the side. Basically, the students move throughout the tiers based on team decisions, and which again, of course, US parents are involved in that, as well as data that we've collected along the way through the tier system. Next slide. Now, our supports in the throughout the district. there's a variety of team members. You'll see there's the general ed curriculum, school counselors, school social workers, the instructional support team, and school psychologists. I'm going to give a brief overview of small snippets because everyone does way more than what I'm going to give to you now. But it is just an overview of what those supports could look like. So the general ed curriculum basically is what all students are provided in all of their different classes that they take in their schedule. As the students progress through their general ed curriculum, whether it be health class, social studies, English, there are social emotional, there's consistently social emotional teaching and learning occurring within those classes. School counselors meet with students to support academic, social, emotional needs. They do K through 12 career education, in addition to doing course selection, scheduling, and the college piece, which of course is for the older students. Our school social workers provide individual as well as group counseling, risk screenings when needed, mobilize school and community resources, and school staff consultation as needed. The instructional support team provides interventions for specific educational concerns to assist with really, it could be any area of concern, any area that impacts a student's education, behavioral, academic, social, emotional in their regular ed setting, in the regular education classrooms. It also, once we've exhausted interventions, it also serves as a screening process for students that may need more intensive types of support. And school psychologists meet with students to support behavioral, social, and emotional needs, as well as conduct psychoeducational evaluations where we're determining eligibility for special education services, gifted education services, as well as 504 plans. Back to Kara.
Okay, so we are going to be talking to you about some of the Tier 1 SEL programming that we do in the district. But before I do that, I'd like to do a brief activity with all of you because sometimes the best way to learn something is to experience it. So this is an exercise that's taken from Mark Brackett, who's the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. He is the author of the book Permission to Feel, and he's also a board member of CASEL. So this is from one of his webinars that I found on the CASEL website called Permission to Feel for Adults. So I'm going to ask you the question, how are you feeling? This is the model you see here is called a mood meter. It's his scientific way to understand our emotional state. So you can see there's an x-axis that measures pleasantness, and the y-axis measures energy. So to measure pleasantness, you can ask yourself questions like, do I want to approach the world or do I want to avoid the world? Am I predicting that things are going well for me over the next couple of days or not so well? Am I feeling comfortable right now or am I uncomfortable? So a +5, +5 means you are experiencing high levels of pleasantness, and a -5 means you're experiencing not such great things right now. On the y-axis, it's energy. So you're either activated, +5, or depleted, -5. Energized, +5, or tired, -5. And then when you cross the two axes, you get these quadrants. In the yellow quadrant, you were feeling high energy and pleasant feelings. The red quadrant, high energy, unpleasant feelings. The blue quadrant, low energy, unpleasant feelings, and the green, low energy and pleasant feelings. So notice how Mark refers to the feelings as pleasant or unpleasant. He really makes a point to not call any emotions bad emotions. So take a moment, check in with yourself, and try to determine what color you are in right now. And now I'm going to ask you, what is your feeling word? What emotion are you feeling right now? And a lot of you, I'm sure, are feeling complex emotions. It's not as simple as, you know, I feel happy or I feel sad. Sometimes we have foreground emotions and then background emotions. So I might be feeling excited to be presenting to you right now. I might have a lot of energy. I might also feel some anxiety in the background. So I could be yellow, I could be red or blue at the same time. So if you want to think of a feeling word, do that now. And often adults try to find or struggle to find the precise words to describe our emotions. It's probably something that we weren't taught very well when we were young. But I'd like you to try to think of a word that describes how you're feeling right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet here. Here are 100 words to describe our feelings. So now that you see more options, how are you really feeling? And that's pretty much the exercise. And that's something we might do with the kids. Label your feelings. And we may have charts in our offices of different feelings. So what are some takeaways from this exercise? One is the question, how are you feeling, isn't so easy all the time. Secondly, we're not always in the habit of checking in with ourselves emotionally. Third, we might have a limited emotional vocabulary. As kids, we probably weren't encouraged to share our feelings. Maybe our parents didn't say, how are you feeling? Or people weren't asking us. Maybe we were told to toughen up. Most of us haven't had an education in healthy emotional regulation, how to manage our angry feelings, how to use coping strategies when we're feeling anxious or depressed. I mean, we may, as adults, go to therapy and learn some of those coping strategies, but it's not something that we were probably taught in our childhoods. And as parents, we are the most important teachers to our children. So we are their social emotional role models. So it's important that we feel comfortable with these skills and that we understand how important these skills are and what it feels like. So that was just a simple exercise. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about development because before we talk about the activities in our district, I want to show you some examples of different developmental tasks at each level. And I want to give you a sense of how important it is for us to use this as a context when we're planning our programming. So even though we're addressing the same core competencies in our curriculum and in our programs, the specific content and focus of our programming is obviously going to change to reflect the developmental age of our students. I made this chart, there's a lot of information on here, but just in general, I wanted to show you some of the tasks of elementary school students. And again, there's such a wide range from kindergarten to 5th grade, but elementary to middle to high school. And I used some of the CASEL competencies. So in the self-awareness and self-management area, in elementary school, children are learning how to identify their emotions and manage their emotions, control their behavior. They're developing a self-concept and self-esteem. They're beginning to learn right from wrong. In middle school, their emotions are more complex. They're understanding more deeper feelings like anger and anxiety. They're continuing to define their sense of self. They're learning to understand their strengths and weaknesses and their interests. And then in high school, they obviously have a much stronger understanding of themselves, and their task is to develop an individuated personal identity. And develop a set of values and an ethical system. In the social areas, kids in elementary school are making friends. They have a best friend. In middle school, they really want to fit in. They're defined by their peer group. So their identity is mostly group-based. They're starting to become more independent from adults in their lives. And then by high school, they're having more mature relationships. They're starting to date. They're becoming even more independent from parents and other adults. And then in the decision-making area, in elementary school, they're thinking concretely. They're not always thinking about consequences to their behaviors. Decisions sometimes are made for them. As they get to middle school, they're able to think more abstractly. They can think of all different sides and think logically, and they become more responsible for their actions. And then in high school, again, they have an increased capacity for abstract reasoning. And again, their peers are a strong influence on their decision making. So all of these are important. It's just an important context that we look at when we're looking at different programs that we're developing. Next slide, please. So let's start with the elementary school curriculum. So how are we teaching these skills to your children at the elementary level? First, I want to preface this by saying that when we talk about teaching SEL skills, as the other presenters have mentioned, it's important to note that SEL can be found across all areas of the curriculum. So teachers are modeling and teaching social and emotional skills all day long. But these are some of the themes of the programming that the elementary school counselors are actually teaching to the elementary students during in-class guidance lessons. So in kindergarten, they're doing self-awareness, thoughts and feelings, personal space, whole body listening. Pre-first, mindfulness strategies for clear and calm thinking. First grade, feelings and friendship. Second grade, empathy, roles in a bullying situation, coping strategies. Third grade, they focus on diversity. Fourth grade, teamwork, and they cover cooperation and communication. And in fifth grade, career awareness, and they start to talk about personal interests and strengths. Next slide, please. In the middle school, our advisory model is really forefront in our SEL efforts. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the advisory model, it's what we used to call homeroom, but it's much more. It's meant to be a family for our students within the larger school. So in normal times, students go to their advisory twice a day, and this is where they're doing a lot of the team building activities and things like that. This year with the pandemic, we recognized that we needed to amp up the SEL efforts. So we've increased the frequency. Students are getting lessons, direct instruction during their advisory time on virtual Wednesdays. And these generally fall into 4 categories. So the first 2 are on this slide, dealing with big emotions and identity and diversity. So you can see that we've done lessons on how to manage big emotions. And I've referenced the different competencies that are addressed in some of our activities. We've done a lot on identity. We've taught active listening skills. Next slide, please. And this slide, I group these into the 2 areas, making social connections and coping strategies. Of course, during the pandemic, we've realized how students are feeling isolated and how important social connections are. We've tried to come up with ways to help kids connect virtually. It's been challenging, but we've done things like human bingo, Google Map activity, bulletin board activities when they came in for hybrid. And then coping strategies. We have a virtual calming room. We've done activities on time management and music as a coping strategy. So those are some of the tier 1 activities that we've done in the elementary and middle school levels. And now Maureen's going to share information about another program that's happening at our middle school.
Thank you, Carol. One of the challenges that comes with social emotional skills is how do you figure out what children's skill sets are. When you are teaching math, you can give them equations for them to show their knowledge. When you're teaching reading, they're able to read passages or they're struggling with passages. But social emotional learning skill sets are skills, but the challenge is how do you assess students on their skill sets? And the middle school has been fortunate enough to pilot a strength-based survey. It's called the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment. There's 2 parts to this. There's a mini DESA which is what the middle school advisory teachers completed for their students at the beginning of March. There are 8 questions, and it's based on the children, are they demonstrating these certain strengths? 937 patent students were screened, and you can see how our student population fell. Their skills are rated as typical, strong, or in need. And based on grade, you have the majority of the students, or a larger group, is 7th grade, followed by 6th, and then 8th. So the important components for us, you can go ahead and Justin and switch it, thank you, is that it gives us some action points. It gives us some things that we want to address for our children and their skill sets. So the middle school has provided training for the behavioral health team as well as teachers. We are going to do the full DESA, which is 72 questions in mid-April. And those are going to be completed for children who on that small survey show that they fell in the need group. The middle school will be starting social emotional learning groups that will address the skill sets that we've seen within our students that we would like to provide some additional strengths and instruction. There'll be a second mini DESA survey completed by the advisory teachers in mid-May. So we want to see, have those children that we've provided some instruction to been able to show some growth in the social emotional learning skills. Next slide.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what's available at the high school. And as we see with the spectrum of development, there's more direct instruction at the younger grades, and it becomes more supportive as the grades go up, and particularly at the high school. So Justin, if you can, one of the supports that we have at the high school is obviously all students have their school counselor, but then they also have, the school counselors have developed the counseling website. I don't know if, Justin, if you can pull that up. So within the counseling website are resources for social emotional well-being. And if you go to that website, you can look at wellness and self-care, teens and sleep, healthy relationships, parent resources, website resources, how to motivate when it's hard, meditation can change the brain, all sorts of resources that can in managing the social emotional well-being of teens. Additionally, next slide, additionally to the counseling website, Mary Beth Lyles, who is the department chair, the next one, Justin, has developed a counseling center newsletter. And if you could pull that up, this monthly newsletter edited by Mary Beth Lyles. And Justin, if you could just hit the March 2021, so just give an idea of what's in this newsletter that comes out monthly. Not only are there college planning, academic type resources, but if you scroll down, then you'll see also, again, some social emotional supports, resources, just a plethora of information for parents and students. Right here, like the 1 to Zen 60-second happiness challenge, parenting on your feet, all sorts of resources, feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or isolated because of the pandemic. The school counseling center, and particularly Mary Beth Lyles, the department chair, has put a lot of energy and effort into providing this monthly resource for high school parents and students to support, again, the overall well-being of students at the high school. Next slide. And the third support that's also offered at the high school, and this is new this year, and was developed by Jessica Bogish, who is the IST coordinator, and Bethany Clemson, who's one of our learning support teachers, are seminars, how to navigate learning seminars. There have been 2 sessions. There was a spring session, and this is the brochure for the fall. There was a fall session, and this is the brochure for the spring session. And what these seminars are offered to any student in all grades, with each session being capped at 6 students per session. They're run during teacher office hours and last 30 minutes. They're facilitated by the IC coordinator, school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, our gifted support teacher. We've all participated in the facilitation of and teaching of these seminar systems. So the ones for the fall session included introduction to hybrid virtual learning, learning management platforms and tracking assignments, self-advocacy and problem-solving skills, stress management and self-care. And as you can see for the spring seminar sessions, there's study and test-taking strategies, attention to task initiation, planning, prioritizing skills, self-care, and stress management skills. These are direct instruction 4-week sessions for any student in the high school who's interested in learning about those topics. Next slide.
Okay, so far we have presented on how social emotional learning is occurring in our schools. But the important piece is social emotional learning and teaching doesn't just end when the bell rings. It continues at home. And we've mentioned this already in our presentation, but families, parents are integral parts of a child's social emotional functioning. And I'm sure as we're going through some of these tips, some of these ideas, strategies, you're going to think to yourself, I do that, or I've done that in the past, or my spouse does that, or my significant other does that, or my mother does that, whatever it may be. A lot of these things, a lot of these skills happen organically in your home setting. You might not even realize that they are social emotional teaching, and that your children are learning these social emotional skills, but a lot of them do happen organically. And what happens is that you are helping to grow your child's social emotional skills. So on these next couple of slides, what you're going to see, what we wanted to do was figure out some common language. So common language that we use at school that you can also use at home. There are many more topics than the 3 slides. Actually, we can probably do an entire presentation on strategies and specific areas and skills of social emotional learning. But these are just some big skills that we wanted to touch on. The first one being sleep hygiene. So sleep in general impacts our brain and our brain functioning. And to know about the brain is also to know that it plays a huge role in our social emotional functioning. Now, technology, although it's wonderful, and that this is what it's allowing us to present this way when we can't be in person, it also has its downsides. And technology in general has a significant impact on our sleep hygiene. And we tend to think of that impact on older kids, but it certainly does have an impact on our younger kids. In general, younger kids are, having access to more and more technology and gaming, those types of things. So some interventions, some ideas would be no TV at least an hour before bed. Maybe you could do a phone drop outside of the bedroom or at the bottom of the stairs where everyone puts their phone in before they go upstairs. I hear a lot of times our high school students anyway will say, well, I can't put my phone away because my alarm clock is on my phone. So what we'll say is, okay, well, there are pre-phones, which they don't remember, but there were separate alarm clocks. So, those are some interventions. Also, in terms of sleeping, mindfulness, relaxation strategies before bed. And that is a good thing in general to do, is to do more calming activities before bed instead of being hyped up before bed. What I will say is, before I even go on, there are resources at the end of this presentation that go more in depth about these particular topics. In terms of the expectations So setting clear expectations. When there's clear expectations, there is a clear and consistent expectations and consequences. There tends to be less surprises, which lends itself to less arguing and anger. Now, I'm not going to say this is not the magic bullet. Nothing, if you have children, which I'm going to assume most of us do, you know that this is not going to take away arguing. There's still going to be arguing. But consistent and clear expectations are something that really can improve that arguing. You can also increase a child's confidence by helping them understand what the expectations are, because then they feel free to do what they need to do within the parameters of those expectations. It also helps them to monitor. Self-monitoring is also a social emotional skill. Self-monitoring, it is their ability to self-monitor themselves and to realize, where am I in comparison to this expectation, and also taking responsibility for the behavior. So clear expectations and consistent expectations, I'm sure you've heard that. You've heard that in every parenting book and every video, but there actually are social emotional skills taught when we do clear and consistent expectations. And the last one there is open and honest communication. And we as parents, we are models for our kids. So when we model open and honest communication with each other, we're modeling that for our children also. A judgment-free zone provides your child a safe place to share information. And I will point this out. Judgment-free does not mean consequence-free. So just because it's judgment-free doesn't mean that they won't receive a consequence for behavior that's outside of the family expectations. Communication skills, like how to have a respectful conversation, how to be a good listener instead of a talker all of the time, and how to problem solve, are lifelong lessons that you're teaching your children throughout the day when you're having open and honest communication. Okay, so coping skills. Coping skills are techniques that we use to manage our emotions. And when we feel anxious or depressed, it is helpful to have a toolbox of coping skills. And so what we try to teach a lot of our kids in school, and what could be a good idea for home, is to help them develop that toolbox of coping skills. So breathing strategies, and breathing really can bring you, it sounds really silly and you're gonna feel really silly doing it, trust me, because I do it with kids and it seems silly. But the whole idea is to bring your body chemistry back to a relaxed state. And that's what breathing can do. Mindfulness, it is the whole idea of being present in the moment and not thinking about other things that are making you depressed in the past or anxious in the future. It is about being right there in the moment. It increases mental clarity. So you're able at that point to be more clear and be able to continue on and make decisions about what's going on. Journaling is a strategy that allows children and adults, I'll say this, all these can be used for adults too, to process their emotions in writing. And even if your child's medium is art, you can keep an art journal. That's a lot of times helpful when there's difficulty in verbalizing, and you can even do this with the younger kids. Have a drawing journal for the younger kids that may not be able to verbalize, and as Kara was saying previously, to label their emotions. Calming apps, this is one of the upsides of technology, that there's a lot of calming apps you can get right on your phone, on your computer, on your iPad, and there are resources for calming apps that you can access in the resource section. There's also calming activities, so you can sit with your child and talk about what calms you down. Let's create a list, a toolbox of what does calm you down, which can include any of these, but can also be walking, reading, drawing, listening to music, or if your child is musical, creating music, taking a shower. It could be, and many other calming activities. Feeling overwhelmed. Again, you can go back and use a lot of those coping strategies if you again, but if your child is feeling overwhelmed. I'll focus a little bit about feeling overwhelmed at school. I think even in the high school level, we see this a lot of times. We expect our kids to be able to self-advocate. And so many times they're not really sure how to do that. And We expect them to do that, and we think, well, they're, how old? They should be able to do that. Sometimes it becomes very overwhelming, and we might need to sit down with them and talk to them. Okay, how do we advocate? So helping your child reach out to their counselor to facilitate communication with the teacher if that's needed. Helping your student create, and this might be for the older crowd, but helping your student create an appropriate email to send to, because in the world of technology that we're living in, a lot of teachers are, using email more and more, is how to create an email to ask a teacher a question, and how to really express your academic, when you're feeling overwhelmed academically. How do you communicate with that in the school setting? The other thing is your child overbooked? For older kids, this might be more helpful, but you can do this with younger kids too, with more of a visual format. It's called back mapping. So back mapping is taking a look at your week, and it could be a week, a day, and how do you fit all of your activities? And even for the younger kids, mom and dad, you might need to sit with them and really work on, okay, let's figure out a schedule. But how do you fit all of your academics, your extracurriculars, because you definitely need downtime, your socialization, your time to eat dinner, your time to sleep. So all the other important areas. Back mapping and visuals are always good tools to have as well. Next slide. Problem solving and decision making. So being able to solve problems most certainly fosters confidence and independence in children. When attempting to work with your child, though, what's really important, and coming from my role, when I'm working with kids, sometimes I see what I think is the problem, and I want to work with that student right on that problem. But so many times I come to realize that problem is not what the student feels is the problem. So it's really important to work with your child and say, what do you think is the problem? Because what you think is a problem is not always what they think is the problem. So it's important to get their input and not always define the problem for them. Model, again, we are our kids' best model. So modeling by offering solutions at first to give an example, especially when they're younger and not sure how to come up with solutions. Then allow your child to think of options. This is important. Normalize mistakes. So if a solution that they came up with doesn't work, it's important to normalize. Okay, then we go back to the drawing table and we look at the next solution. When we don't normalize mistakes, a lot of times that grows fear of mistakes in individuals and children. And a lot of times when you have fear of mistakes, that may lead to perfectionism. And perfectionism, it's like a kind of a cycle. Perfectionism increases anxiety and depression when it's not healthy. You certainly can have a level of perfectionism, but it has to be a good balance of being able to let go and accept mistakes, and also being able to say, keep moving forward in whatever task that you're completing at the time. And lastly, social skills and relationships. So social skills are critical. It's a critical element in helping kids succeed all around. It's succeeding socially, academically, emotionally, personally. They're skills that help kids join in conversations, and it's not just conversations on the playground or on, at a family function. It's how to even be part of a group in a classroom, and how to listen to your peers in an academic setting. Collaborating with peers, developing lasting, healthy relationships, and self-advocating. And that's just to name a few areas that social skills impacts. Have open, age-appropriate conversations about healthy and unhealthy relationships. Obviously, those conversations can get more complex as your child grows and gets a little older. And when there's social exclusion, social rejection, again, talk to your kids about what coping skills do you have? What are your coping skills? Empower them to seek healthy friendships, healthy relationships. It's, again, normalizing that it is okay not everyone, it goes back to that old saying that not everyone is going to be your friend. So, and that's okay. We have to have healthy relationships, and some relationships aren't meant for us. So it's having those age appropriate conversations about social skills and relationships as well. Next slide. Okay, so these next 3 slides are the resource slides, and you will have access to them. I really broke it down into specific topics that you would be able to go in and just pull up. It's an article, there's articles, tip sheets, resources. Again, as Dr. Fernan mentioned, you can go on the counseling website, or as Maureen and Kara mentioned, you can go on, you can, work with the middle school on a lot of these strategies as well. But these are some really quick tip sheets and resources that you'll be able to access. And there you go. Now, we've talked a lot about how your children are learning social emotional skills in school and how they transfer to the home setting. But this point is directly to you as parents. Now, the quote is, make yourself a priority once in a while. It's not selfish, it is necessary. So we as parents, we tend to take a lot on ourselves. And we overextend ourselves a lot because we're giving to our children. But what's important to remember is that we are models for our children on how to self-care and how to take time out of the day, out of the week, just out of life for self-care, to take care of ourselves. That will show our children that we need to take social emotional steps to make sure that we're okay in life. That will show them that we can take time out, that it is important for us as even parents to take that time out for ourselves and to reset. So the resources are not just for your kids. The resources are for you also. They're for kids also, but sometimes as adults, we do need reminders of some of our basic social emotional functioning, because it does get lost a lot of times. And that concludes our presentation.
Well, thank you, ladies. That was a lot of information in a brief amount of time, so we appreciate all of that. I do want to remind our audience that you do have a Q&A feature at the bottom. We have received some questions, but if there's something that sparked your interest or you have something you would like to ask a member of the group, please feel free to add it to the Q&A. I am going to be moderating some questions for the ladies, as well as potentially answering 1 or 2 that are possibly out of their wheelhouse, because I got some texts already about who's going to be answering those. So I will certainly do my best to weigh in as needed. But again, thank you so much for all of the information you've shared. Give me 1 second and I will be asking the first question. Very first question, this is going to be for Maureen. Does the DESA involve any student self-assessment, or is it all how they are rated by adults?
The DESA just released for high school age children self-assessment. It is mobile friendly. It takes about 7 minutes to complete, and there's a personalized growth plan that is included with that. The DESA also has parent surveys at the and elementary teacher and elementary parent surveys, but the school district decided to start with the middle school as a pilot school this year.
Maureen, there's a follow-up question. Do you know if there's one that's given to middle school age students for them to complete?
I do not know. I know there's a parent one and a teacher one.
That is correct, Maureen. I do not believe there's currently a middle school version available. They just came out with that high school version. So that is why the middle school has not administered a self-report at this time. There's a follow-up question. I'll take this one regarding the DESA, and the question is related to, are parents going to be provided with the scores? As Maureen indicated, the middle school is currently piloting the DESA. As she shared in her slide, we are sharing sort of the global information in if a student within a grade band or a number of students who have been rated in need as a strength or in the typical range. Obviously, as part of students' educational records, if we have specific requests, we will work with families. But right now, our hope was to get a better sense of the DESA and how it can support our students at the tier 1, tier 2, and possibly even tier 3 levels. And for students with IEPs and other protection plans, we will be possibly sharing that information in their programming as we move throughout the process. But we just started, we're very excited, and we're very interested in where this can lead to supporting our students. And so if this has positive outcomes, we will be looking to share the DESA with our high school and or our elementary school teams. And that will all be discussed with the board as we move throughout our next school years. So let's see what the next question that's come in. Next question, this is for anyone. How is SEL affected or changed during an acute crisis, such as the COVID pandemic, at all levels from K to 12?
I can kind of respond to that from a high school perspective, and I'm sure Sabrina can add to that as well. That I think anytime there's a stressor like a pandemic or a traumatic experience for any student, emotionality elevates, and when emotionality elevates, other skill sets may decrease a bit, like academic ability or regulatory skill sets. So I think we have seen at the high school an increase in some emotionality with these students. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of fearfulness, uncertainty about things. And in addition, during the pandemic, academically, we've been adjusting from virtual to hybrid to, some configuration back and forth. So that lack of predictability also can increase anxiety in kids. And I think that's why, particularly during a traumatic or event like this, that it's that much more important for us to be building skill sets, social emotional skill sets in individuals, so that not only are we working reactively with kids right now, but proactively developing these skills. So in the future, they'll have, as Sabrina mentioned, a toolbox to be able to reference and utilize when stressful situations like this happen in the future.
And as a, just due to the situation that we were in, especially coming back at the beginning of the year and really not knowing, I think we really have done a good job, as well as parents, adjusting this year. But what we did was again, this is more high school related, just because Wendy and I are at the high school, but is that there were the seminars created. Now they look a little different than what they look like at the beginning of the year when we first